The ash-gray sky hung low over the remnants of what was once a thriving metropolis. Now, only the skeletal frames of buildings reached toward the heavens like desperate, bony fingers. The wind carried toxic dust through empty streets, swirling it into miniature cyclones that danced between the ruins. This was Planet Zephyr, or what remained of it after the war, a graveyard of concrete, steel, and forgotten dreams. Jace moved silently through the debris, his respirator hissing with each measured breath. His weathered hazard suit bore the scars of countless expeditions into the forbidden zones. The faded patch on his shoulder read Salvager, though he preferred the term scrap collector. Labels didn't matter in a world reduced to survival. His eyes, sharp and calculating behind the cracked visor, scanned the horizon for movement. Zone Red 7 was strictly off-limits, according to the Reclamation Authority. But their patrols were predictable, and the risk was worth the reward. The rare metals and functional tech hidden beneath these ruins could fetch enough ration credits to last months in the settlement. "Sector clear," Jace muttered to himself, more out of habit than necessity. 3 years of solitude had made talking to himself a comfort in the deafening silence of the wasteland. 3 years since the war between humanity and the Zephyrians had officially ended. 3 years since the peace accord that left both civilizations in ruins and created no man's lands like this one. 3 years of scavenging and surviving, day by day, hour by hour. Jace checked his rad counter, elevated but within acceptable limits. He had about 4 hours before he'd need to retreat to cleaner air. Plenty of time to check the collapsed research facility ahead. Intelligence suggested the sublevels might still be intact, possibly containing valuable medical supplies or power cells. The building loomed before him, half swallowed by the earth. A massive hole gaped where the eastern wall had once stood, revealing twisted corridors and shattered laboratories within. Jace secured his gear and prepared to enter when a sound froze him in place. It was faint, almost imperceptible beneath the mournful howl of the wind. A crackling, like static from a radio transmitter. Jace's hand instinctively moved to the pistol at his hip as he scanned for the source. There it was again, a voice, barely audible through layers of interference. Not waking up. Mama won't wake up if anyone hears me." Jace's breath caught. The voice was small, childlike, its tone unmistakably filled with fear. "Please, help us. I'm scared." Radio communications were strictly monitored by the authority. Unauthorized broadcasts could bring swift and merciless response. Yet, this wasn't a military frequency. This wasn't even a human transmission pattern. Against his better judgment, Jace adjusted his comm unit, trying to strengthen the signal. For the first time in years, something beyond mere survival stirred in his chest. A voice, a child's voice, calling out from somewhere in this hellscape. "This is stupid," he muttered, even as his fingers worked to triangulate the source. "Probably a trap." But the voice came again, trembling and desperate. "Mama's under the big rocks. I can't move them. Please, if anybody hears me." The transmission ended abruptly, replaced by dead static. Jace stood motionless, wrestling with himself. Every instinct honed by years of surviving told him to walk away. There was nothing but death in these ruins. No one to save. Nothing worth the risk. And yet, he found himself checking his equipment. Oxygen levels, medkit, emergency beacon, all functional, if not optimal. The voice had come from deeper within Zone Red 7, in a sector he'd marked as high risk on his tattered map. The radiation levels there would limit his exposure time even further. "I'm not a hero," Jace said aloud, as if trying to convince the ruins around him. "I'm a scavenger. I take things that nobody wants anymore." But already his feet were moving, carrying him in the direction of the transmission. Something about that tiny voice had penetrated the armor he'd built around his heart. armor as necessary for survival as the hazard suit protecting his body. The path grew treacherous as Jace navigated through unstable structures. Twisted metal groaned under his weight, and more than once, he had to scramble back as sections collapsed behind him. The wind was picking up, carrying with it the warning signs of an approaching dust storm. If he didn't find shelter soon, he'd be caught in the open when it hit. His detector pinged, indicating the signal's origin. Ahead, a massive collapsed apartment complex formed a chaotic mountain of concrete and steel. Most of it appeared unstable, but a small gap near the foundation might lead inside. Jace hesitated at the entrance. Going in meant potentially trapping himself if the structure shifted. But the alternative, leaving whoever was inside to face the coming storm alone, suddenly seemed unthinkable. "Hello," he called out, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. "Is anyone there? I heard your transmission." Silence answered him, broken only by the ominous whistle of wind through broken windows. Then, just as he was about to call again, a faint blue glow appeared deep within the rubble. "Are you human?" The voice was clearer now, tinged with both hope and fear. A small figure moved in the shadows, and Jace's flashlight caught the reflection of two large, luminescent eyes. "Yes," he replied, tension making his voice rough. "I'm human. My name is Jace. I'm a salvager. Who are you?" The figure moved closer, revealing itself to be a child, no more than 7 or 8 years old by human standards. But this was no human child. Her skin was a pale blue, textured like fine scales that caught the light. Those luminous eyes, pupilless and glowing faintly, were undeniably Zephyrian. "I'm Luma," she said, her small hands clutching a makeshift transmitter fashioned from scraps. "Please help. My mama won't wake up." Jace felt his world tilt. A Zephyrian child, here in the ruins. A survivor where no survivors should be. Every propaganda message, every warning from the authority about alien threats, crashed against the simple reality before him. A frightened child calling for help. "Take me to her," he said, making his decision. "Quickly, there's a storm coming." Luma led him deeper into the ruins, navigating the treacherous path with the surety of one who had lived among the destruction for some time. They came to a partially collapsed room where a Zephyrian woman lay pinned beneath a fallen support beam. Blood, iridescent blue in the dim light, had pooled and dried around her. She was trying to reach the food cache, Luma explained, her voice small. Then everything fell. Jace knelt beside the woman, checking for signs of life. Her breathing was shallow but present, her pulse faint and irregular. The beam had crushed her lower body, but the weight had also compressed the wounds, possibly preventing her from bleeding out. "How long has she been like this?" Jace asked, already reaching for his medkit. "2 sleeps," Luma replied, watching his every move with those glowing eyes. "I gave her water, but she stopped drinking after the last sleep." 2 days. It was a miracle the woman was still alive. Jace administered a stabilizing agent from his limited supplies, knowing it was designed for human physiology, but hoping it might help. "Luma, I need to move this beam to get your mother out," he explained, scanning the area for anything he could use as leverage. "But first, I need to know, are there others? More of your people here?" The child shook her head. "Just us. Mama said we had to hide. The bad humans would hurt us if they found us." Jace felt a pang of guilt at being included in bad humans, though he couldn't deny the truth of it. The war might have officially ended, but the hatred lingered. Zephyrians were still considered enemies by many, including the authority that controlled what remained of human civilization on this planet. "I'm not going to hurt you," he promised, finding a metal rod that might serve as a lever. "I'm going to help get your mother out, and then we need to find shelter before the storm hits." As if emphasizing his words, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Jace worked quickly, positioning the makeshift lever under the beam. "When I lift this, I need you to help pull your mother out. Can you do that?" Luma nodded, determination replacing fear in her glowing eyes. "On three, 1, 2, 3. Jace strained against the lever, muscles burning as the beam slowly lifted. Luma grabbed her mother's arms and pulled with surprising strength for her small size. Inch by excruciating inch, they freed the injured woman. The moment she was clear, Jace let the beam crash back down, sending up a cloud of dust. He quickly examined the woman's injuries: multiple fractures, internal bleeding, severe trauma to the lower spine. She needed proper medical attention, not his rudimentary field skills. "We need to move," he said, checking his rad counter. The levels were rising as the storm approached, driving radioactive particles before it. "I have a transport bot outside that can carry her." "Bot broken," Luma said, pointing to a small utility robot crumpled in the corner. "Tried to use it to lift rocks. Didn't work." Jace cursed under his breath. Without the bot, he'd have to carry the woman himself, severely limiting their speed and options. "Please," Luma said, her small hand touching his armored sleeve. "Please take me and Mama, human." Something in her voice, the simple trust, the desperate hope, broke through Jace's carefully constructed walls. In that moment, he wasn't a scavenger or a survivor. He was simply a man who couldn't leave a child and her mother to die. "I will," he promised. "Let me check the bot first. Maybe I can repair it." The utility bot was standard authority issue, likely salvaged or stolen. Its locomotion systems were damaged, but the power core still functioned. With quick, practiced movements, Jace bypassed the damaged circuits and rerouted power to the hover mechanism. "Not perfect," he muttered as the bot rose unsteadily above the ground. "But it'll hold her." Together, they carefully placed Luma's mother on the floating platform. The woman stirred slightly but didn't regain consciousness. Jace secured her with straps from his pack, then checked his map. "We have 45 minutes before the storm hits full force," he said, calculating distances in his head. "My shelter is too far. We need somewhere closer." Luma reached into her tattered clothing and produced a small, glowing device. Zephyrian technology, compact and elegant, despite its obvious damage. "Mama's map," she explained, activating it to reveal a holographic display of the surrounding area. "This place, safe if trusted." The location she indicated was a research outpost not far from their position, one that didn't appear on Jace's authority-issued maps. It might offer shelter, but it also might be a trap. Yet with the storm closing in and an injured woman to transport, options were limited. "Lead the way," Jace decided, taking control of the hoverbot. "Stay close to me." They emerged from the collapsed building into a landscape transformed. The sky had darkened to an ominous copper brown, and the wind carried stinging particles that pattered against Jace's visor. In the distance, a wall of swirling dust approached, obscuring everything in its path. "We need to hurry," Jace urged, checking that his respirator was sealed. Luma had no protective gear, but her species seemed more resistant to the toxic atmosphere, another adaptation that had given them an advantage during the war. They moved as quickly as possible through the ruins, Jace constantly scanning for threats while keeping the hoverbot steady. The unstable platform required constant adjustments to prevent it from tipping over the uneven terrain. The first drone appeared when they were halfway to the outpost, a sleek, black machine that hovered silently above the debris field. Authority Patrol, programmed to neutralize any unauthorized presence in the restricted zone. "Down!" Jace hissed, pulling Luma behind a fallen wall. The hoverbot followed, its mechanisms whining in protest at the sudden movement. The drone's scanning beam swept across their hiding place, the red light penetrating dust and shadow. Jace held his breath, knowing their heat signatures would be clearly visible to the machine's sensors. "Don't move," he whispered to Luma, whose eyes were wide with terror. The drone hovered for what seemed like an eternity before its programming directed it to continue its predetermined path. Only when it disappeared behind a distant tower did Jace allow himself to breathe again. "They're increasing patrols," he muttered, checking his scanner for other threats. The storm must have triggered security protocols. "Bad humans looking for us?" Luma asked, clutching her mother's limp hand. "Not specifically," Jace assured her, though he wasn't entirely certain. "But they'll shoot first if they spot us. We need to stay hidden." They continued their journey, now moving from cover to cover, pausing whenever Jace's scanner indicated approaching drones. The storm was gaining on them, the leading edge of dust already reducing visibility to mere yards. When they finally reached the coordinates from Luma's map, Jace was momentarily confused. There was nothing there, just a sheer rock face partially covered by rubble. "Are you sure this is the place?" he asked, checking the time. Less than 15 minutes until the full force of the storm hit. Luma nodded confidently, approaching the rock face. Her small fingers traced a pattern on what appeared to be natural formations. To Jace's astonishment, a section of the rock shimmered and disappeared, revealing a hidden entrance. "Zephyrian camouflage tech," he breathed, impressed despite himself. During the war, such technology had made their installations nearly impossible to locate without specialized equipment. Inside, emergency lights flickered to life, responding to their presence. The facility was small, but intact, a research outpost built into the natural cave system. Most importantly, it was sealed against the outside atmosphere. "Safe," Luma declared, helping Jace guide the hoverbot through the narrow entrance. Once inside, the hidden door resealed behind them, cutting off the howling wind. Jace removed his helmet, taking his first unfiltered breath in hours. The air was stale but clean, filtered through Zephyrian environmental systems that somehow still functioned. "Let's get your mother somewhere comfortable," he said, noticing a medical area in the adjacent chamber. They transferred Luma's mother to the examination table, where Jace could finally get a proper look at her injuries. The woman was clearly a scientist, judging by the remnants of her uniform. Her features were more angular than Luma's. Her skin, a deeper blue, marked with ceremonial patterns that Jace recognized as denoting high status among Zephyrian clans. "What's your mother's name?" Jace asked, as he carefully cleaned her wounds. "Seraphine," Luma answered, watching his every move. "She's a bioengineer. She makes things that heal." Jace nodded, applying antiseptic from his kit. "Well, Seraphine is very strong. She's held on this long, which means she's fighting." The medical supplies in the outpost were limited, but included some Zephyrian medications that Jace couldn't identify. He hesitated, unwilling to administer something that might do more harm than good. "Do you know what any of these are?" he asked Luma, gesturing to the labeled containers. The child studied them, then selected one with confidence. "This one stops pain. Mama gave it to me when I was sick." Jace carefully administered a small dose, watching for any adverse reaction. To his relief, Seraphine's breathing seemed to ease slightly, her face relaxing from its pained grimace. "Now we wait," he said, setting up monitoring equipment he found in the lab. "The storm will keep us here for at least 12 hours. Luma climbed onto a stool next to her mother, her small hand never leaving Seraphine's. "Thank you for helping us, human Jace." The simple gratitude caught him off guard. "You can just call me Jace," he said awkwardly, unused to conversation after so long alone. "Why were you and your mother hiding here? I thought all Zephyrians were evacuated to the sanctuary zones after the war." Luma's luminous eyes dimmed slightly. "Mama said the truth was hidden. She had to find the key to show everyone." "The key?" Jace asked, but the child merely shrugged, either unwilling or unable to explain further. As Jace explored the outpost, he found evidence of hasty evacuation, research left mid-experiment, personal belongings abandoned. One room contained communication equipment, some of it still functional. Another held living quarters with 2 small cots. "You should rest," he told Luma, returning to the medical bay. "I'll watch over your mother." The child shook her head stubbornly. "I stay with Mama." Jace didn't argue. Instead, he brought a blanket from the living quarters and draped it over Luma's small shoulders. The child accepted it with solemn dignity. "My father was human," she said suddenly, her voice small in the quiet room. "He was a soldier, Captain Ree Kellen." The name hit Jace like a physical blow. Captain Kellen, his former commanding officer during the early days of the war. A man known for his integrity and his controversial views on peaceful coexistence with the Zephyrians. "Your father was Captain Kellen?" Jace asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Luma nodded. "Mama has pictures. He had kind eyes, like yours." Jace turned away, memories flooding back. Kellen had disappeared during a diplomatic mission 3 years ago, presumed captured or killed by Zephyrian forces. The official record listed him as a war casualty, his mission classified. "I knew him," Jace admitted, the words feeling strange on his tongue. "He was my commanding officer, a good man." "You were a soldier?" Luma asked, studying him with renewed interest. "A long time ago," Jace replied, unwilling to elaborate. Those memories belonged to another life, one he deliberately left behind when he became a salvager. Before Luma could ask more questions, a soft moan from Seraphine drew their attention. The Zephyrian woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing the same luminescent quality as her daughter's, though dimmer with pain and fatigue. "Luma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Mama!" the child cried, joy transforming her face. "You're awake! Human Jace helped us. He knew Father." Seraphine's gaze shifted to Jace, confusion giving way to wariness. "Who are you?" "Just a salvager," Jace replied, maintaining a respectful distance. "I found your daughter's transmission and came to help. You were trapped under debris for 2 days." Seraphine attempted to sit up but collapsed back with a pained gasp. "The storm." "We're safe," Jace assured her. "Your daughter led us to this outpost. We'll wait out the storm here." The Zephyrian woman studied him intently, as if searching for something in his expression. "You said you knew Ree?" Jace nodded. "Captain Kellen was my commanding officer during the early conflict. I served under him until—" He trailed off, unwilling to speak of the mission that had changed everything, the one that had led to his disillusionment and eventual desertion. "Until the Meridian Valley incident." Seraphine finished for him, her eyes reflecting understanding. "You were there?" The mention of that place sent a chill through Jace. Meridian Valley, site of one of the worst atrocities of the war, officially recorded as a Zephyrian attack on a human settlement. The reality, as Jace had discovered too late, was far different. "How do you know about that?" he asked, tension evident in his voice. "Because Ree told me everything," Seraphine replied, her gaze unwavering. "About the false flag operation, about how the authority sacrificed its own people to justify escalating the war, about how he tried to expose the truth and was silenced." Jace felt as if the ground had dropped from beneath him. Captain Kellen had known, had tried to expose it. The official story was that Kellen had been killed in action, a hero who died fighting the Zephyrian menace. "Is he alive?" Jace asked, the question escaping before he could stop himself. Seraphine's eyes dimmed, and she shook her head slowly. "No. They caught him helping evacuate Zephyrian civilians. He died ensuring we escaped. But before he did, he gave me something, the key to exposing everything." "The truth key," Luma interjected, her small face solemn. "Mama's been trying to activate it." A distant rumble shook the outpost as the storm raged outside. The lights flickered momentarily before stabilizing. Jace checked his scanner. The radiation levels outside were spiking, making the facility their only safe haven for the foreseeable future. "What exactly is this key?" Jace asked, his soldier's instincts awakening after years of dormancy. And why risk your lives to activate it? Seraphine struggled to sit up, this time allowing Jace to help her. Because the peace is built on lies, she said, her voice strengthening with conviction. The accord that ended the war was nothing but a ceasefire while both sides regroup. The same people who orchestrated Meridian Valley are still in power, still working toward the same goal: total eradication of my people. She reached for her daughter's hand, drawing strength from the contact. The key is a biological memory module, Ree's testimony, along with classified documents and video evidence of what really happened, not just at Meridian Valley, but at dozens of other sites. Evidence that the war was engineered by a faction within your authority, working with extremists among my people. And you believe exposing this will change anything? Jace asked, skepticism heavy in his voice. People believe what they want to believe. The hatred runs too deep now. Not if the truth is impossible to ignore, Seraphine countered. The key isn't just data. It's the activation code for a dormant satellite network designed to broadcast directly to every communication device on the planet, bypassing all authority filters. The implications were staggering. If what she said was true, such a broadcast could destabilize the fragile post-war order. Whether that would lead to renewed conflict or genuine peace was impossible to predict. And this outpost is connected to the satellite network? Jace guessed, looking around with new understanding. Seraphine nodded. It was a joint research facility, one of the few where humans and Zephyrians worked together before the war. The transmitter is still intact, buried beneath this level. Before Jace could respond, his scanner emitted a shrill warning. He checked the display, his expression darkening. "We've got company," he announced, moving to the security console. "Multiple drones, converging on this location. They shouldn't be able to detect us through the camouflage, unless they're specifically looking for Zephyrian technology signatures," Seraphine finished, attempting to stand despite her injuries. "They must have detected the outpost's power systems when they activated." The security feed showed at least 6 combat drones circling the area, their scanning beams penetrating the swirling dust storm. Behind them, a larger transport was descending, an Authority Enforcer unit, carrying human troops. "They're not regular patrols," Jace realized, recognizing the unmarked transport. "Those are special operations. Cleaners." "The same unit that silenced Ree," Seraphine said grimly. "They've been hunting us ever since we escaped the sanctuary zone." Luma pressed closer to her mother, fear evident in her glowing eyes. "They found us again. Mama." Jace assessed their options, falling back on military training he hadn't used in years. The outpost defenses were minimal, designed for environmental hazards, rather than military assault. The camouflage would buy them time, but once the enforcers deployed ground-penetrating scanners, their hiding place would be exposed. "How long would it take to activate this key of yours?" he asked, making his decision. Seraphine looked at him in surprise. "You're willing to help us?" "Captain Kellen believed it was worth dying for," Jace replied, checking his weapon's charge. "And I've spent 3 years running from what happened at Meridian Valley. Maybe it's time to stop running." A smile, the first he'd seen, transformed Seraphine's face. Despite her injuries, she projected a quiet strength that reminded Jace of her husband. "The activation sequence takes approximately 20 minutes, but I need to reach the lower level, and in my condition—" "I'll help you," Jace said, already gathering equipment. "Luma, I need you to watch the security feeds. If you see them approaching the entrance, you tell us immediately." The child nodded solemnly, taking position at the console as Jace helped Seraphine to her feet. The Zephyrian woman winced, but remained standing, determination overriding pain. "The access is hidden," she explained, as they moved slowly toward the back of the outpost. "Another security measure." She pressed her palm against what appeared to be a solid wall. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Emergency lights activated as they carefully made their way down, illuminating a laboratory much larger than the outpost above. This facility was clearly the heart of the operation. Advanced equipment lined the walls, most of it showing signs of hasty disassembly. In the center stood a transmitter array, its components dark and dormant. "Help me to the main console," Seraphine directed. Her breathing labored from the exertion. Jace complied, easing her into the operator's chair. Seraphine's fingers moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, bringing systems online one by one. The laboratory hummed with awakening power. "The key itself is here," she said, removing a small, crystalline device from a hidden compartment in her clothing. The object pulsed with faint blue light, similar to the glow of Zephyrian eyes. "It contains Ree's biological memories, encoded directly from his consciousness before he died." "Biological memories?" Jace echoed, watching as she inserted the crystal into a specialized port. "A Zephyrian technology," Seraphine explained, initiating a complex sequence on the console. "We can preserve experiences, knowledge, even emotional states as energy patterns." Ree underwent the procedure to ensure the truth couldn't be distorted or denied. The transmitter array began to power up, components rotating and aligning. On the monitor, a progress bar indicated the system boot sequence, 17% complete. A small voice called down from above. "Jace, Mama, they're using big machines at the rocks." Jace cursed under his breath. "Ground-penetrating radar. They've found us. How much longer?" 15 minutes minimum," Seraphine replied, hands flying over the controls. "The system needs to authenticate the key and establish connections with the satellite network." "We don't have 15 minutes, Jace warned, checking his weapon and moving toward the stairs. "Keep working. I'll try to slow them down." Upstairs, Luma pointed anxiously at the security feed. The storm had abated slightly, allowing visibility of the Enforcer troops deploying heavy equipment. They had already identified the hidden entrance and were setting up breaching charges. "Mama's going to make the truth shine," Luma said, a strange certainty in her young voice. "Like Father wanted." Jace knelt beside her, looking the child directly in her luminous eyes. "Luma, I need you to hide. Find somewhere small, somewhere they won't look right away. No matter what happens, stay hidden until your mother comes for you. Do you understand?" Luma nodded, though fear clouded her expression. "What about you?" "I'm going to make sure your mother has enough time," Jace replied, checking the seal on his hazard suit. It wasn't combat armor, but it would have to do. He quickly gathered improvised weapons from around the outpost, anything that might slow down the Enforcers. His military training resurfaced as he set up choke points and prepared ambush positions. The odds were impossible, but he'd faced worse during the war. A muffled explosion signaled the Enforcers had breached the outer door. Jace positioned himself behind cover, weapon ready. He'd lost everything once before by following orders without question. This time, he was choosing his own path. The first Enforcer through the door fell to Jace's precision shot. The second managed to fire back, forcing Jace to duck as energy bolts scorched the wall behind him. 3 more entered in combat formation, their faceless helmets scanning the room methodically. "Hostile engaged," one reported into his comm. "Single human, armed, Zephyrian signatures detected below." "You're making a mistake," Jace called out, trying to buy time. "This facility is under salvage protection. Authority Regulation 17B. "Stand down, scavenger," the lead Enforcer responded, his mechanized voice emotionless. "This is a cleansing operation. Compliance will be noted in your file." Jace answered with another shot, taking down a second Enforcer before rolling to new cover. The remaining troops advanced, their superior weapons and armor giving them confidence. 5 minutes to full activation. Seraphine's voice came through the outpost's comm system. "The satellite network is responding." The enforcers reacted immediately to the voice, changing their focus to the stairwell. Jace used their momentary distraction to attack, managing to disable another before being forced back by concentrated fire. "Target located," the lead enforcer announced. "Proceeding to objective." Two enforcers moved toward the stairwell, while the others kept Jace pinned down. He needed to reach them before they found Seraphine, but the barrage of energy bolts made movement suicide. Then, unexpectedly, the lights throughout the outpost flickered and died, plunging everything into darkness. Only the emergency strips along the floor provided minimal illumination. "Power surge detected," an enforcer reported, his helmet visor switching to thermal imaging. "Possible countermeasures." Jace didn't waste the opportunity. Moving silently in the darkness, he circled behind the distracted enforcers and struck. Years of navigating pitch-black ruins had given him an advantage they lacked, despite their technology. He dispatched one with his combat knife before the others realized what was happening. The remaining enforcer fired wildly, energy bolts illuminating the darkness in brief, blinding flashes. Jace felt a bolt graze his arm, the energy burning through his suit and searing flesh beneath. He ignored the pain, focused entirely on reaching the stairwell before the enforcers descending it could harm Seraphine. The laboratory below had transformed. The transmitter array was fully active now, its components spinning rapidly as energy built within the system. Seraphine worked frantically at the console, her injured body supported by sheer willpower. The two enforcers had reached the bottom of the stairs, weapons trained on her. "Step away from the console," one ordered. "Final warning." "It's too late," Seraphine replied without turning, her fingers continuing their work. "The broadcast has begun." "Then you're no longer required," the enforcer stated coldly, taking aim. Jace hurled himself down the remaining stairs, crashing into the enforcer just as he fired. The shot went wild, striking equipment instead of Seraphine. Both men tumbled to the floor, grappling for control of the weapon. The second enforcer turned to assist his comrade, giving Seraphine precious seconds to complete the activation sequence. The crystalline key was pulsing rapidly now, its blue glow intensifying as it interfaced with the transmitter. Jace fought with desperate strength, knowing each second he bought might make the difference. The enforcer was stronger, his powered armor giving him an advantage in the struggle. A armored fist connected with Jace's jaw, sending pain shooting through his skull. "System authenticated," an automated voice announced from the console. "Satellite uplink established. Broadcast initiating in 10 seconds. "Stop that transmission!" the second enforcer shouted, abandoning the fight to rush toward the console. He raised his weapon, preparing to destroy the equipment. Seraphine made her choice in that moment. With a swift movement, she positioned herself between the enforcer and the console, her body the last shield protecting the truth. The energy bolt struck her squarely in the chest. She collapsed without a sound, her body sliding to the floor as the final countdown continued. "No!" Jace roared, breaking free from the first enforcer with a surge of rage-fueled strength. He tackled the second, driving him away from Seraphine's fallen form. "Broadcast initiated," the automated voice announced with eerie calm. "Planetary distribution commencing." The transmitter array reached its peak output, energy cascading through the system. The crystalline key dissolved into pure light, its essence feeding directly into the broadcast stream. Above them, hidden satellites long dormant awakened, their signals piercing through every communication network on the planet. And then, Captain Reek Helen's voice filled the air, not just in the laboratory, but in every home, every settlement, every military installation across the war-ravaged world. "My name is Captain Reek Helen, Special Operations Command," the voice began, carrying all the authority and integrity Jace remembered. "What you are about to see is classified footage of Operation False Dawn, the true beginning of the war between humans and Zephyrians." The enforcers fought with renewed desperation, knowing what the broadcast contained But it was too late. The truth, preserved in Kellen's biological memories, was flowing outward in an unstoppable wave. Video footage, documents, testimonies, evidence of the manufactured conflict, the deliberate atrocities, the lies that had fueled years of hatred and destruction. Reinforcements poured down the stairs, but they hesitated upon seeing the broadcast playing on every screen in the facility. Some lowered their weapons, confusion replacing military discipline as they witnessed their own leaders ordering the slaughter of civilians, both human and Zephyrian, to provoke war. In the chaos, Jace crawled to Seraphine's side. Her breathing was shallow, the energy bolt having cauterized the wound even as it destroyed vital organs. Her luminous eyes were dimming, but a smile curved her lips as she watched the screens around them. "He did it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ree kept his promise. "Save your strength," Jace urged, applying emergency measures that he knew were futile. "Your daughter needs you." At the mention of Luma, Seraphine's gaze sharpened. "Protect her, Jace. She is the future, proof that our species can live in harmony. Promise me." "I promise," Jace replied without hesitation, holding her hand as the light in her eyes began to fade. Tell her that her father and I will always watch over her from the stars." With those words, Seraphine slipped away, her final moments witnessed by the truth she had died to reveal. Above, the Enforcer commander received new orders through his secure channel, orders that reflected the rapidly changing situation as the broadcast spread across the planet. Riots were erupting at authority installations. Military units were standing down. The carefully constructed narrative that had sustained the war was unraveling in real time. "Withdraw," the commander ordered his remaining troops. "Priority extraction. Leave no witnesses." But even as they prepared to execute this final directive, new signals appeared on their tactical displays. Aircraft approaching rapidly, not authority vessels, but the distinctive signatures of the peacekeeping coalition, a neutral faction that had long advocated for genuine reconciliation between species. The enforcers hesitated, caught between conflicting orders and the rapidly shifting reality. Some removed their helmets, unwilling to continue once the truth was revealed. Others maintained discipline, awaiting further instruction from a command structure that was already collapsing under the weight of exposed lies. Jace remained by Seraphine's body, his weapon ready to defend her, and the truth she had died for. He had failed to save her, but he wouldn't fail the promise he had made. "Luma," he called out when the sounds of fighting above had ceased. "Luma, it's safe now." For a moment, there was no response, and fear clutched at Jace's heart. Then, a small section of ventilation ducting near the floor shifted, and Luma emerged from her hiding place. She took in the scene with those wise, ancient eyes that seemed too knowing for her young face. She saw her mother's still form, the disabled enforcers, the broadcasts still playing on every screen. Understanding dawned in her expression, not the confused grief of a child, but the solemn acceptance of one who had lived with the shadow of loss for too long. "Mama joined Father in the stars," she said, her voice small, but steady as she approached. "Yes," Jace answered, unable to offer false comfort. "She was very brave, the bravest person I've ever known." Luma knelt beside her mother, placing a small hand on the cooling blue skin. She completed her purpose. The truth is free now. Above them, the sounds of aircraft landing reached their ears. Voices called out, not the harsh commands of enforcers, but the measured tones of peacekeepers establishing a secure perimeter. "We should go up," Jace said gently. "There are people coming who will help us." Luma nodded, but before rising, she leaned down and whispered something in her mother's ear, words in the Zephyrian language that Jace couldn't understand. A farewell, perhaps, or a promise of her own. They ascended the stairs together. Luma's small hand held firmly in Jace's. The outpost was now filled with peacekeepers, a mix of humans and Zephyrians working together, their uniforms bearing the symbol of unity that had once seemed like an impossible dream. "Survivors located?" a peacekeeper announced upon seeing them. "One human adult, one Zephyrian child. Medical assistance required." A medical team approached, but Luma shrank back, pressing against Jace's side. After everything she had experienced, her trust was not easily given. "It's all right," Jace assured her, kneeling to meet her eyes. "These are good people. They'll help us." "You'll stay with me?" Luma asked, her glowing eyes searching his face for reassurance. "I promised your mother I would protect you," Jace replied, the weight of that commitment settling on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a purpose. "I won't leave you." The Peacekeeper commander approached, a human woman with the weathered face of a veteran. "You're the ones who initiated the broadcast?" Jace nodded, still holding Luma's hand. "Seraphine did. She didn't make it. She was carrying out Captain Kellen's final mission." Recognition flashed in the commander's eyes at the mention of Kellen's name. "I served with Kellen before he disappeared. We thought he was mad when he tried to warn us about the conspiracy." "He was the sanest of us all," Jace replied, the irony bitter on his tongue. "He saw the truth when the rest of us were blind." The commander looked at Luma, realization dawning. "She's Kellen's daughter, isn't she? The rumors were true." Jace merely nodded, protective of the child's privacy even now. "She'll be safe with us," the commander promised. "Both of you will. The broadcast has changed everything. The authority leadership is in chaos. The hardliners are being arrested, and people are demanding answers." "And the Zephyrians?" Jace asked, concerned for Luma's future in a world still healing from hatred. "The sanctuary zones are being opened," the commander explained. "The Zephyrian leadership has called for calm and reconciliation. There will be trials, of course, on both sides. But for the first time since this conflict began, there's genuine hope for peace." As they spoke, the first rays of dawn penetrated the storm clouds outside, sending shafts of golden light through the damaged entrance of the outpost. The toxic dust was settling, and though the landscape remained scarred, the air itself seemed lighter. Peacekeepers gathered the evidence from the laboratory, ensuring that the truth Seraphine and Kellen had died for would be preserved. Others prepared Seraphine's body for transport, treating her with the dignity she deserved. "What happens now?" Jace asked, feeling strangely adrift. For years, survival had been his only goal. Now, standing amid the ruins of the old world and the tentative beginnings of a new one, he faced a future he hadn't dared imagine. "Now we rebuild," the commander replied simply. "Not just buildings, but trust. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick. But it's possible now, thanks to what happened here." Luma tugged at Jace's hand, drawing his attention. "Can we go outside?" she asked, her eyes drawn to the sunlight streaming through the entrance. "I want to see the sky." Something in her simple request touched Jace deeply. This child, born amid war and raised in hiding, wanted nothing more than to stand beneath an open sky without fear. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Let's go see the sky." Hand in hand, they walked out of the outpost into the morning light. The air was still tainted with radiation and dust, but Jace's suit filters indicated levels were dropping, whether from the passing storm or some larger atmospheric shift. He couldn't tell. They climbed a small rise near the outpost, from which they could see the peacekeepers establishing a base camp. Aircraft continued to arrive, bringing supplies, medical teams, and representatives from both species. Luma stood tall, her small face turned toward the clearing sky. The sunlight caught her luminous eyes, making them shine like beacons in the dawn. Around them, a world was changing, awakening from a nightmare of hatred into the uncertain light of truth. "My father used to say that truth is like the sunrise," Luma said, her voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years. No matter how dark the night, it always comes eventually. Jace looked down at this child, daughter of a human soldier and a Zephyrian scientist, living proof that differences could be bridged. In her, he saw the future Captain Kellen and Seraphine had died to protect, a future worth fighting for, worth living for. "Your father was right," Jace replied, squeezing her small hand gently. "And now it's our job to make sure everyone can stand in that light." Around them, the ruins of war stretched to the horizon, a landscape of destruction that would take generations to heal. But as peacekeepers of both species worked together below, as the truth continued to spread across the planet, as the first tentative steps toward genuine reconciliation began, Jace felt something he had thought lost forever: hope. Luma stepped forward, her face lifted to the brightening sky, her silhouette small against the vastness of the horizon. Yet, in that moment, she seemed to embody all the potential of this new dawn, a tiny voice that had echoed from the ruins and changed the course of history. "We'll be okay now," she said with the simple certainty of a child. "The stars told me so." Jace didn't question her words. After all he had witnessed, after all that had been revealed, who was he to doubt the wisdom of the stars? Instead, he stood beside her, guardian and guided, as the sun climbed higher over a world forever changed by truth, courage, and the unbreakable bond between two species who had finally learned they were not so different after all. And in the distance, as if in answer to an unspoken prayer, the first green shoots pushed through the poisoned soil, tentative, fragile, but alive with possibility. Life finding a way, as it always does, even in the most hostile of environments. A beginning, not an end. A promise of renewal in a world reborn from the ashes of lies.